Tonight, we study the Italian game. The Italian game is decided in 3 simple steps. First, both players fight for the center with their pawns. Second, both sides develop a knight towards the center. And third, white develops the bishop to c4. That bishop to c4 is the defining choice. It aims through the central d5 square towards f7. f7 is defended only by the king in this opening position. This is what makes this the Italian game. This position creates immediate pressure on a vulnerable square. It forces black to consider king safety early. It also means that future central breaks can carry tactical consequences tied directly to that square. Before we go into the main lines, here is why the Italian is so popular. It follows opening principles cleanly. It takes a share of the center. It develops pieces efficiently. It makes castling straightforward. And it gives both sides clear plans without demanding memorization to reach a playable structure. From the same Italian starting position, 3 different paths appear. The gioco piano, better known as the slow game. The gioco pianissimo, better known as the very slow game. And the Evans Gambit, where white offers a pawn to accelerate development and open lines. We begin with the slow game, the gioco piano. Line 1. White plays pawn to e4 to control the center and open up lines for the queen and bishop. This sets up rapid development and gives white early influence over key central squares. Black plays pawn to e5 to contest the center and open lines for the queen and bishop. This prevents white from gaining space for free and keeps the position open for active development. White plays knight to f3 to develop with tempo and attack the pawn on e5. This strengthens central control and forces black to account for the pressure on the e5 pawn. Black plays knight to c5 to defend e5 and influence d4. This keeps development efficient and prepares black's pieces to meet a future central break. White plays bishop to c4 to target f7 and develop actively. This creates direct pressure on a square defended only by the king, increases control along the diagonal, and keeps kingside tactics available if the center opens. Black plays bishop to c5 to develop actively and target f2. This balances white's bishop activity, prepares castling, and places black's pieces on natural squares without blocking central pawns. White plays c4 to support d4. This prepares a strong pawn center, reinforces e4, and gives white a stable way to recapture in the center while keeping structure intact. Black plays knight to f6 to develop and attack e4. This increases pressure on white's center, accelerates kingside development, and challenges white to justify the central build. White plays d4 to challenge the center and gain space. This sets up central exchanges, increases influence over e5 and c5, maintains momentum, and threatens to open the position while white's pieces are already active. White captures with the e-pawn to d4 to reduce white's center. This resolves the central tension immediately, prevents white from maintaining two central pawns, and open lines where piece activity matters. White recaptures with a c-pawn to d4 to restore central presence. This places a pawn on d4 as an anchor, keeps a space advantage, and opens lines for development behind the pawn. Black plays bishop to b4 to check and challenge coordination. This forces a response, increases pressure on the developing queen side, and tests whether white can hold the center while completing development. White plays knight to c3 to block the check and develop. This supports the pawn on d4, improves coordination, and keeps development efficient without losing central control. White's structure is now clear. A pawn on d4 sits in the center. The bishop on c4 remains aimed at f7. The knights are developed. Black has developed actively and placed pressure points on the center and on white's coordination. From here, the opening naturally continues with castling and completion of development. The defining opening decisions have already been made. The slow game is best understood by summarizing what each side has achieved and what each side must do next. The slow game summary. White's reasoning. White plays e4 to claim central space and open lines. This creates a developmental advantage in open positions if white stays coordinated. White plays knight to f3 to develop with tempo and attack e5. This forces black to spend attention defending the center while white develops. White plays bishop to c4 to target f7. This creates pressure on a vulnerable square and makes black's king's safety a constant consideration in the opening phase. White plays c3 and d4 to build a center. This gains space, increases influence over e5 and c5, and opens the game, while white pieces are ready to use open lines. White recaptures with the c-pawn to d4 to keep a pawn in the center. This creates a central anchor and gives white room to place pieces comfortably. White's advantage in this line is space and a clear central structure. Space gives white easier squares for development. A central pawn on d4 supports piece activity and can restrict black's pieces when defended properly. White's main responsibility is central development and coordination. If white fails to defend the d-pawn, the space advantage disappears. If white opens the position before the king is safe or pieces are developed, the open lines can benefit black as much as white. Black's reasoning. Black plays e5 to contest the center directly. This keeps the position open and prevents white from building a free space advantage. Black plays knight to c6 and knight to f6 to develop while pressuring the center. This defends e5, attacks e4, and keeps central squares under control. Black captures on d4 to prevent a lasting pawn duo. This reduces white's space and clarifies the structure into targets. Black plays bishop to b4 to force development choices. This tests white's coordination and can increase pressure on the central pawn and on the queenside pieces. Black's advantage in this line is active development and clear counterplay against the center. Black's main responsibility is timing and king safety. If black creates pressure without completing development, the f7 square can become a real tactical problem. If black completes development first, pressure on the center becomes more reliable and harder for white to ignore. That is the gioco piano, the slow game. White builds a center, black challenges it. The opening is defined by space versus pressure. Now let's move on to the very slow game. Line 2. Gioco pianissimo. White plays e4 to control the center and open lines for the queen and bishop, establishing central influence and enables quick development. Black plays e5 to contest the center and open lines. This prevents white from expanding freely and keeps piece development natural for both sides. White plays knight to f3 to develop with tempo and attack e5. This strengthens central control and creates immediate pressure on black's central pawn. Black plays knight to c6 to defend e5 and influence d4. This supports the center and prepares black to meet central expansion if white plays d4. White plays bishop to c4 to target f7 and develop actively. This creates pressure on a vulnerable square and places a bishop on a strong diagonal without delaying development. Black plays bishop to c5 to develop actively and target f2. This keeps symmetry in development, prepares castling, and keeps black's bishop active without blocking pawns. Now, white makes the defining pianissimo choice. White plays d3 to support e4 and keep the center closed. This strengthens white's central pawn, without forcing exchanges, limits early tactical volatility, and prepares the dark squared bishop to develop smoothly. Black plays knight to f6 to develop and attack e4. This increases central pressure, prevents white from drifting into an uncontested center, and prepares kingside safety. White plays knight to c3 to develop and reinforce e4. This improves coordination, increases control of central squares, and supports future plans without committing to opening the center immediately. Black plays d6 to support e5 and control the timing of central breaks. This strengthens Black's center, reduces the impact of a sudden d4, and prepares development of the dark squared bishop. White castles kingside to secure the king and connect the rooks. This improves coordination, prepares central rook activity, and keeps the position stable while plans are formed. Black castles kingside to secure the king and connect the rooks. This completes king safety and allows Black to organize central counterplay without exposure. Now the very slow game is established. White has chosen to delay d4. White has reinforced e4 and d3 instead of immediately challenging the center. Black has supported e5 with d6 and matched development with safety. The center is not yet transformed. The opening phase becomes about arranging pieces so that when the center finally opens, one side benefits more than the other. In the pianissimo, White often prepares d4 later, after development is complete and pieces are placed to use open lines. Black often prepares to meet that d4 with exchanges or pressure, aiming to reduce White's space without falling behind in development. The opening identity is clear, so we summarize the reasoning. The very slow game summary. The very slow game summary. White's reasoning. White plays e4 to claim central space and open lines. White plays knight to f3 to attack e5 and develop efficiently. This creates early pressure without sacrificing coordination. White plays bishop to c4 to aim at f7. This creates a lasting pressure point that can matter if the center opens later. White plays d3 to support e4 and keep the center closed. This reduces early exchanges and gives White time to develop pieces to ideal squares before committing to a central break. White castles early. This secures the king so that later central action does not expose him. White's advantage in this line is control of the pace. By delaying d4, White decides when the center changes shape. This can make the eventual break stronger if the pieces are placed well. White's main responsibility is to remain purposeful while playing slowly. If White only defends and never prepares expansion, Black completes development comfortably and equalizes. The pianissimo rewards good placement, not passive safety. Black's reasoning. Black plays e5 to meet the center and keep equal space. Black develops knight to c6 and knight to f6 to defend e5 and pressure e4. This ensures white's center requires continual support. Black plays d6 to support e5 and make the center resilient. This reduces early tactical problems and controls how powerful a future d4 can be. Black castles early. This keeps the king safe, so black can challenge the center without immediate risk. Black's advantage in this line is structural stability and reliable development. The pawn chain e5 and d6 is hard to break quickly. That stability gives black time to prepare counterplay. Black's main responsibility is to avoid conceding too much space. If black allows white perfect development without pressure, a later d4 can arrive with strong effect. Black must develop with active intent, not just safety. That is the gioco pianissimo, the very slow game. The center stays closed longer, and the opening becomes a contest of timing and placement. Now let's move on to the Evans Gambit. Line 3. White plays e4 to control the center. Black plays e5 to contest the center. White plays knight to f3 to develop with tempo and attack e5. Black plays knight to c6 to defend e5 and influence d4. White plays bishop to c4 to target f7 and develop actively, creating that direct pressure on the vulnerable square. Black plays bishop to c5 to develop actively and target f2. This places the bishop on an active diagonal and prepares castling while keeping symmetry and development. Now, white begins the gambit. White plays b4 to sacrifice a wing pawn for time. This attacks the bishop, gains tempo through forced bishop movement, and prepares to open the center while white develops quickly. Black captures with bishop to b4 to accept the gambit. This wins material, but places the bishop on a wing square and spends time that white aims to convert. Black captures with bishop to b4 to accept the gambit. This wins material, but places the bishop on a wing square and spends time that white aims to convert into development speed. White plays c3 to attack the bishop again and prepare d4. This gains another tempo, strengthens the central plan, and sets up the central break with greater force. Black plays bishop to a5 to preserve the bishop and keep the extra pawn. This maintains material advantage, but keeps the bishop displaced from the center. White plays d4 to challenge the center and open lines. This sets up central exchanges, increases influence over e5 and c5, and aims to turn the development lead into immediate activity. Black captures with the e-pawn to d4 to reduce white's center. This clears central tension, removes one of white's central pawns, and tries to drain attacking momentum by simplifying the center. White castles kingside to secure the king and connect the rooks. This keeps development fast, improves coordination, and prepares rooks to enter open central lines. Black plays knight to f6 to develop with tempo and attack e4. This increases central pressure and helps black catch up in development while defending king safety plans. White recaptures with the c-pawn to d4 to restore central presence. This places a pawn on d4, keeps the center active, and preserves open lines where white's development advantage can matter. Now, the Evans Gambit has established its opening bargain. Black has an extra pawn. White has gained time through forced bishop development moves. White has gained time through forced bishop moves. The center has opened earlier than in the slow game and the very slow game. White's plan is to use activity and open lines. While black is still competing, white's plan is to use activity and open lines while black is still completing development. Black's plan is to complete development safely, neutralize the activity, and let the extra pawn become decisive later. Let's summarize the reasoning. Evans Gambit summary. White's reasoning. White plays e4 to claim central influence and open lines for development. White plays knight to f3 and bishop to c4 to develop actively and create pressure. Bishop to c4 keeps f7 under direct scrutiny and makes king safety a constant factor. White plays b4 to gain time by forcing the bishop to move. This accelerates development and shifts the opening from a slow structure to a rapid. White plays c3 to gain another tempo and prepare d4. This sets up a central break that opens lines while white's pieces are arriving quickly. White plays d4 to challenge the center and open the position. Open lines amplify a development lead. White castles early. This keeps the king safe so the opening can remain sharp without self-exposure. White's advantage in this line is initiative and open lines. White's main responsibility is accuracy. If white fails to develop quickly into the open lines, the pawn deficit becomes a long-term weakness. If white converts activity into pressure while black is still organizing, the gambit achieves its purpose. Black's reasoning. Black accepts the pawn to gain material. This tests whether white can prove compensation through time and activity. Black allows the bishop to be chased because the trade is pawn for tempi. It aims to survive the initiative and enjoy the extra pawn. Black captures in the center to reduce white's pawn mass. This clarifies the structure and can blunt attacking momentum by limiting white's central space. Black develops knight to f6 to attack e4 and catch up. This reduces white's lead in development and prepares safe castling and defense. Black's advantage in this line is material. An extra pawn matters if the king stays safe and development completes. Black's main responsibility is discipline and timing. If black wastes moves while the center is open, white's activity can become a direct attack. If black develops cleanly, the extra pawn becomes a stable long-term advantage. That is the Evans Gambit, a pawn offered to accelerate development, a center opened early to convert time into pressure. Final review. The Italian game is defined by the bishop on c4, creating direct pressure on f7 through the d5 square. That pressure shapes king's safety decisions and can add tactical weight to central breaks. The gioco piano, the slow game, is a line that builds a center with c3 and d4. White seeks space and structure. Black seeks pressure and counterplay against the central pawn. The gioco pianissimo, the very slow game, is a line that plays d3 to keep the center closed longer. White seeks ideal placement before opening the center. Black seeks stable development and a well-timed challenge. The Evans Gambit offers a pawn with b4 to gain time. White seeks initiative and open lines. Black seeks consolidation and conversion of material. 3 lines, 3 speeds. One opening foundation of central control, efficient development, and king safety. That's it for tonight, as we've gone over and studied the Italian game and 3 of the most played lines. I hope you have enjoyed this. Good night.